So I was thinking about the new
You know
project.
that moment in a conversation when everyone seems comfortable with a simple explanation, but your mind keeps circling it. Someone says something that sounds obvious, and everyone nods. The topic moves on, but something in you stays behind. Your mind quietly starts pulling the idea apart. You notice details other people didn't seem to catch. Tiny inconsistencies, unanswered questions, possibilities that branch out in different directions. And sometimes you don't say anything, not because you have nothing to add, but because explaining the entire chain of thoughts would take longer than the conversation allows. From the outside, it can look strange. Some people assume you're quiet because you're shy. Others assume you're distant. Occasionally someone might even joke that you're overthinking. But what often gets missed is that this pattern isn't simply about thinking more. It's about thinking differently. There's a certain kind of mind that processes the world in a way that's less linear and more layered. A mind that automatically scans for patterns, contradictions, connections, and underlying meaning. And for people who have this kind of cognitive wiring, everyday situations can feel subtly different from how they seem to most others. What's rarely explained clearly is that many of these behaviors are strongly associated with a particular neurological pattern often seen in people with high cognitive ability. Not just intelligence in the sense of knowing facts or solving puzzles, but the way the brain organizes information itself. Neuroscientists sometimes describe intelligence not as how much the brain knows, but how efficiently different regions of the brain communicate with each other. One influential idea in neuroscience is called the parietal-frontal integration theory. It suggests that individuals with higher cognitive ability often show stronger connectivity between the frontal lobes, responsible for complex reasoning and planning, and the parietal regions, which help integrate sensory information and patterns. In simple terms, these areas of the brain talk to each other more efficiently. When that happens, the brain becomes very good at combining separate pieces of information into a larger mental picture. So when someone hears a statement, they don't just process the words. Their mind automatically begins mapping connections. Where did this idea come from? How does it relate to something else? What happens if the assumption behind it is wrong? This isn't usually a conscious effort. It's more like a background process that runs constantly. That's one reason many people with high cognitive ability often feel mentally busy, even when nothing dramatic is happening around them. The brain is still working, still analyzing, still noticing. Another interesting finding in neuroscience involves something called the default mode network. This network becomes active when the mind isn't focused on a specific task, during moments of daydreaming, reflection, or internal thinking. Research suggests that in individuals with higher cognitive ability, this network often shows stronger activity and connectivity, which means the mind tends to wander into deeper internal reflection more easily. From the outside, this can look like distraction, but internally, it can feel like the brain is exploring entire landscapes of ideas. That tendency sometimes begins early. Many people who later show high cognitive ability remember childhood moments when they felt slightly out of sync with the pace of conversations around them. Not necessarily faster, just different. While others were satisfied with surface explanations, their minds kept searching for deeper ones. Sometimes teachers appreciated it, other times it caused friction. A child who asks too many why questions can be seen as curious, but they can also be seen as difficult. Over time, many people quietly learn to filter their thought. Not because they disappear, but because they realize that explaining them all isn't always socially convenient. So the mind keeps doing what it does best, just more quietly. It's important to say something clearly here. None of this makes someone better than anyone else. Human intelligence isn't a single hierarchy where some people are above others. Different minds specialize in different kinds of processing. Some people excel in emotional awareness, some in social intuition, some in creativity, others in structured reasoning. Every cognitive style comes with strengths and limitations. A brain that constantly analyzes patterns can be incredibly good at solving complex problems, but it can also make it harder to mentally switch off. The same pattern recognition system that sees solutions can also notice potential problems everywhere, which means insight often comes with a quiet trade-off. Many highly analytical minds experience periods of deep mental rumination. The brain that easily connects ideas also easily connects worries. A small uncertainty can expand into dozens of possible outcomes, sometimes useful, sometimes exhausting. This is why high cognitive ability doesn't automatically lead to a life that feels simple or easy. In fact, many studies suggest that people with very high intelligence scores report higher rates of certain internal struggles, including anxiety and overthinking. Not because intelligence causes suffering, but because the same neural sensitivity that detects patterns can also detect potential threats. The mind becomes very good at simulation. Running scenarios. Imagining consequences. Looking several steps ahead. In the right context, that ability can be extraordinary. In the wrong context, it can feel like living with a mind that never completely rests. And yet there's another side to this pattern that often goes unnoticed. The same neurological traits that produce deep analysis also tend to produce deep curiosity, a fascination with ideas, a quiet appreciation for complexity, an ability to see meaning in places others might overlook. Many people with this cognitive style find themselves drawn to books, systems, philosophy, science, or creative work, not because they are trying to appear intelligent, but because their minds naturally move toward depth. Surface-level explanations rarely feel satisfying. They feel unfinished, like a story that stopped halfway through. Of course, none of this means someone must identify with every part of this pattern. Human minds are diverse, and intelligence itself is far more complex than any single measurement or label. But if parts of this description feel familiar, the constant pattern searching, the layered thinking, the quiet mental noise, it may not be a flaw in your personality. It may simply be the natural behavior of a brain that processes the world with unusual depth. A mind that notices more connections, more possibilities, more unanswered questions, and sometimes, realizing that can shift something subtle. The feeling that you're thinking too much begins to soften, because thinking deeply isn't a mistake your brain is making, it's something your brain was built to do. And if this way of experiencing the world resonates more than you expected, there are other patterns like this that quietly shape how certain minds move through life. Patterns most people never learn to recognize, but once you see them, they're difficult to unsee.